Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Cat's Track. We post an interview with an amazing Canadian each weekday for your daily inspiration. Today, I would like to introduce you to my friend, Stephanie Kusie. Stephanie was born in Calgary and was raised in the community of Midnapore. Stephanie tells me that her loved ones are very supportive. Politics is a lifestyle, and all family members have to be on board and to sacrifice. Her amazing husband worked for a minister and prime minister, so he knew what they were all getting into. Yikes. She also believes that she is lucky to have her parents and siblings in Calgary, so her son has lots of attention and love around him. It truly takes a village. Besides her loved ones, Stephanie is passionate about promoting democracy abroad. When nations have democracy, she believes that everything else falls into place: the rule of law, economy, human rights, and all of it. Friends, you'll find her full bio attached. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Catherine, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. When I see the list of people who have been on your program before me, I was very flattered by the invitation, and it's always wonderful to reach out to our community and to sort of share my perspective of how the last few months have rolled out and what I see ahead for us. So it really is a pleasure to be here with you today, Catherine. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my honor. You're a perfect addition to our guest list, so thank you.
Thank you.
Are you ready for the questions that we sent your way?
I'm ready.
Okay, so you mentioned the greatest challenges you've had in the last few months. Do you mind going into a little detail about that?
Sure, definitely. Well, I would say that the greatest challenges that I faced in the last few months, well, I'll go back further than that. So I think in the House of Commons, we could see what was happening over in China and the way that the virus was developing in Wuhan. And we tried very much as the official opposition to really bring this to the attention of the government, to sort of say, hey, look, this is on the horizon. What are you doing to protect us as Canadians, and what are you doing to prepare? And, you know, I really think, and my colleagues would agree in the Conservative caucus, that the government did get off to a slow start. I think they were slow to close our borders, in addition to that large amount of personal protective equipment that they sent over to China without the foresight to think, oh, we might need this in the future when the virus actually arrives here. They were quite slow off the mark, I think, to really recognize what was looming ahead for us as a nation and as Canada. But eventually they kind of got into the swing of the public safety response and the health response. And I have to give a lot of credit to, I think, the provincial jurisdictions. I personally feel Jason Kenney, our premier here, as well as my good friend Tyler Shandro, now health minister, we grew up together in the Midnapore riding, and it's great to be elected officials together now. They've done an amazing job of responding from that public health and safety perspective. So I think once that was in place, then we turned to economic support. And I do think that the Liberal government did a decent job of responding from a economic support perspective. Almost too good a job, Catherine, and I'll get into that later when I speak about my concerns for what's ahead for us as a nation after this pandemic. But once they rolled out their suite of support, so everything from the emergency response benefit to the wage subsidy, to the business loans that were available, to the student supports that were available. Seniors, they were a little slower on. Not-for-profits, I think they could have done more. I'm glad that the wage subsidy was extended to not-for-profits. But really my main job as the Member of Parliament for Calgary Midnapore was to triage all of the constituents that needed support at that time. And it has been said over and over again, but this was an unprecedented time within our history. And it really took some time to go one by one through the people who had contacted our office, who needed help, who needed support, to determine which support they required, and if so, what we could do to help them meet the requirement for that support so that everyone could just get through this time. Because really, that's what this last few months has been about, is just survival, economic survival, health survival, mental health survival, on so many levels. You know, I'm very fortunate. My family's been healthy. Both my husband and I are still employed, but that really is just the beginning of it. And there are so many people who've been affected. So I would say it was triaging the individuals who within my constituency who needed support. And then also in my role as Shadow Minister for Families, Children, and Social Development, sort of identifying the gaps that the government did not account for or did not recognize through the different cases that came through my office. So one gap we saw, for example, was with Service Canada. The government made the decision to close down Service Canada offices, deeming them non-essential, which I still find a little shocking to this day. But that really had an impact on some major communities within the country. Seniors will usually go in person, you know, go to banks, these types of things. They couldn't do that. They'll pick up their phone and call their local Service Canada branch. They couldn't do that. Same thing with rural communities. A lot of times in rural communities, they will rely on the Service Canada Centre as a hub, and they just could not do that. They were reliant upon systems which were being overloaded at the time, and which in many cases were new systems which had just been implemented, which hadn't got all the bugs out of them. And so as a result of that, you know, that really was one example of a shortfall that we identified. But there were many others from seniors, and I was very fortunate to have your colleague Kim Moody testify at our Human Resources in terms of the impacts that this has had on individuals and their investments, what it means for retirement planning, all these types of things which, you know, you really have to think, you have to certainly think of the moment, respond to the moment, but think beyond that as well. But I would say from April to June, once we got the public safety aspect under control, and by under control, I mean we're able to evaluate caseload, the health system to manage it. Really, it was triaging individuals to those economic supports because, you know, I will always stand for the free market and a strong economy. But this was a unique situation where Canadians needed the support of government. And that is my role as their member of parliament, is to coordinate that and advocate for them to get that support they need to get them through this time. They've been good Canadians, they've paid their taxes, they've contributed to the economy. This should have been the one time the government was there for them. But now we do have to move forward.
Yeah, agreed. May I ask an ad lib question while we're on this topic?
Yeah.
I'm always curious, and many of my friends are, right out of the gate they said, well, masks aren't going to work. And I've heard different theories as to why we said that was the case at the beginning. And now, of course, it's mandatory here in Alberta. What is your thoughts as to why they don't work now they're mandatory?
Well, I think that the government was dealing with, and public health officials were dealing with something that they were not familiar with. This was a new virus. I think that you know, we saw even recently in the media 3-4 weeks ago, the hype again that it is an airborne virus and not a droplet borne virus. And I have no medical background, so I'm really not qualified to speak too much on that. But I really think that public officials were making the best decisions that they could with the information that they had at the time. Now, I think there are many things, as I said before, we should have done earlier and sooner, such as shutting down the borders. I'm actually really stunned right now that you have to have your temperature taken if you leave Canada, but you don't have to have your temperature taken when you arrive in Canada. Now, that doesn't make sense to me at all. You know, I personally, I choose to wear a mask. Of course, in Calgary, it is a bylaw now. You must wear a mask indoors. But I feel as though it protects others who are around me and protects myself. But that's my personal choice that I've made. But as for officials, you know, I heard it again this morning from the public health lead out of Prince Edward Island. This is a new virus. We're still learning information about this. Even the long-term effects, right? You can't go to your Facebook or Twitter feed without seeing some celebrity talking about the long-term effects of this virus. We didn't know, we don't know, we're learning, and we are adapting. Having said that, it is no excuse, Catherine, for inaction on the part of a government when they know the risks are there. And I do think we saw some of that with the Liberal government.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
And the three things that you want to share with the audience today.
Yeah, sure. No problem at all. So when I mentioned about the triaging of the supports, getting us through the difficult time, really what my next concern was the economic recovery of the nation. And I've actually seen very little done from the government's perspective, the federal government's perspective. Of course, here in Alberta, we're very fortunate. We have had, again, Jason Kenney's government did an economic recovery plan, which I think is excellent. I've reviewed it. I think it's very forward-thinking while not ignoring our natural resources industry, which I believe is still a very viable industry. But that in addition to the economic recovery, I think we really have to think about that from both a local perspective and a national perspective as well. So on a local perspective, I set up the economic Calgary Midnapore Economic Recovery Task Force, and we had 25 small businesses in the riding that helped me to determine sort of what was necessary for us to move forward in my community. But from a federal perspective, I really think that we have not seen anything in terms of a national economic recovery plan. And I think that if I was the Prime Minister, I would be doing an internal inventory nationally to determine what we have in terms of agriculture, textile, energy, mineral, and evaluating that as well as our production capacity, what we can export based upon excess, and who do we want to trade with. I think we'll see sort of a world reorder possibly after this pandemic, as we see some world trends accelerated and some reset to change direction. And then of course, you know, if we must import certain products or services, you know, where do we want to get those from? So before I get to my 3 points, I'll just add that to my last response, that I think the economic recovery is so important going forward. And I really, as I said, have yet to see the Liberal government putting that forward. I believe we are the only G7 nation still that does not have an economic recovery plan. And it's something that is absolutely necessary if we are going to recover from this pandemic. As you know, we have incredible deficit this year in the 343 billion last time we checked. That's horrible, and $1 trillion debt at this point. So we absolutely have. So with that, I'll present my 3 ideas. My apologies, I should have put that in the last bit there, but wanted to add it here, Catherine.
It's all good.
Thank you. So my first message to those who are listening would be that political action has real consequences. And I've said this on other programs, that politics isn't just, you know, running for office and showing up in the legislature, showing up in the House of Commons. It is everything from a conversation you have with a neighbor and you're trying to convince them of your point of view, or a social media post that you make on Facebook. Those things have effects throughout communities. I don't know about your community, but you know, someone can't go to the mailbox in my community without it showing up on the local community page. So when you say something or make a statement, it has real effects. And I think with that people have to be really conscious about what they are saying in social media, the thoughts and ideas that they are putting out there, that these have real consequences. And I think sometimes people act to things, and I'm guilty of this too sometimes, is out of emotion. I was very recently in a situation in a caucus meeting where I actually had to have a colleague. I was so upset, sort of. I had to verify with her everything I was about to say, present publicly to the caucus meeting, to ensure that it was coming from a reasonable place, and not a place of emotion. And she would offer her edits or say this, don't say that. But I think make sure that it is coming from a place where you are looking to contribute something and better the community, and not from just sheer emotion. And the second thing is really think about the consequences, the butterfly effect or the domino effect of the words or phrases that you use, because the smallest things can have the furthest reaching effect. And I think we need to be very conscious when we are choosing our words. When I do a statement in the House, or a statement or question and question period, every word is chosen. There is nothing extraneous. I don't think you have to do that when you well, I do that with my tweets as well. My communications are very deliberate. Everything I do is deliberate. There's nothing reactive. There's nothing off the cuff. If I say something, it's because I really mean it. And I think people have to think about that as well when they speak. What does this mean if I say this? Could this be something that affects a sector in my community? Will it affect a business in my community? Will it affect what will be the butterfly or domino effect of saying something? So I would say that would be my first thing, is to really be conscious of the words that you choose, and the time to speak up, and the time to hold your peace. My second point would be is to really encourage independent thinking. I think that it is very easy to just look at the headlines and not consider what point they are coming from, or what the counterbalance of the perspective might be. And I think it's very important that when we see a story in the mainstream media, or a celebrity say something, because I could see this years ago, even leading up to, I want to say, was it the 2004 US presidential election, when the celebrity think was starting to come out. And I will say I did have the pleasure of meeting President W. Bush during my time as Consul to Dallas. But, I think we have to be very, very evaluative of, that's not a word, of what we hear in the media from celebrities or from others. It doesn't mean we shouldn't listen. We should always listen, absolutely. Without question, we should listen to other people. We should evaluate what they have to say, but we should evaluate it. And we should use it with the same criteria I mentioned in the first point of, is this true? What tells me this isn't true? What tells me this is true? Has what I've seen match up, my personal experience match up with what I've seen, and what could be the consequences of, again, of these statements or words or ideas? Again, what is the butterfly effect? So I think with that, you really have to be an independent thinker, come to your own conclusions, and have the courage to speak them, again, when it is appropriate. I think it's equally not useful to go around slinging what some would consider to be insensitive ideas or insults. But when you have that moment, and I think discernment and judgment are things that come with age and with experience, Catherine, that's my experience. But when you do have those moments where you have an opportunity to say something, or to provide an opportunity for your listener or the listeners to consider another point, you should do that. So I just would really encourage people to do that. And my third point to the audience would be never, ever, ever give up hope. Things can change all the time. Things are changing constantly. In my life, I just look back, Catherine, some of the things that I wanted more in the world than anything else, and they didn't happen, ended up being such incredible blessings, if you will, or fortunate events that allowed other doors to open. But things can always change. We must believe that humanity is fundamentally good and kind and productive. We have to go forward with this thinking, but never give up hope. And that includes working towards the things you believe in and the values you believe in and the people you support. And, you should never hesitate to shine light on those things. And, that's another thing you see in politics all the time is there are so many incredible, talented and intelligent people with such amazing communication skills. Like some of my colleagues, like Rachel Harder and Shannon Stubbs, and we have amazing new MPs in this new group. Tracy Gray from Kelowna, Raquel Dancho out of Manitoba. And, we need to shine the lights on each other and to really promote and support each other. Because two heads are always better than one, as the saying goes. And they will do the same for you, and you will achieve more in doing that than in just supporting yourself and promoting yourself. So as I said, don't give up hope. Things can always change. As a conservative, I felt that 2015 to 2019 was a very difficult time here in Alberta, but I'm very pleased with the provincial government that we've seen and the rollout that we've seen. And I carry the same hope for Canada as a member of the official opposition, that eventually we will see a return to a strong, stable, conservative majority government. And that is because I don't want to get too political here, Catherine, but certainly all these scandals have not helped the government at this time. But we need more than platitudes and selfies and tweets. We need solid values. And prior to being a member of Parliament, I was a diplomat for several years with all of my postings in the Americas. But I think back to the Harper Administration, and you mentioned this in the opening about my passion for democracy abroad. And I look back, and that government had unfailing values when it came to our foreign policy. As things you mentioned, like democracy, like the rule of law, like economic principles, like good justice systems, all of these things. And I really felt that allowed for us to have a solid, coherent foreign policy that we were able to go out into the world with and had a lot of respect for at that time. And I really think we have seen that crumble. But I'm hopeful we can get that back again. And I do believe Canadians that had a lot of hope for Justin Trudeau because he had this bill of goods about equality and feminism, and and we're seeing this chipped away at slowly, that he is not all that he said he was. And I really believe that we provide a solid value-based alternative. And so never give up hope. Things can always change. Miracles happen. The unexpected happens, and that's often the best things in life, Catherine. But those would be my 3 pieces of advice for all the listeners.
I love it. Words of wisdom, my friend. I knew it.
Oh, you're you're kind. Right back at you.
It's so true. Very good. And what about a good news or legacy or something in closing that you'd like to say to everyone?
Yeah, I think that the good news is that the worst has happened. Now I say that, and obviously if we wanted to, we could sit here and think of a million more doomsday scenarios. But essentially, the worst has happened in terms of our society being closed down as we knew it. But guess what? We're still here. We're still here. Most of us are still here, I should say. I recognize there have been some terrible tragedies and losses through this, but we as a society, as a community, are still here. And we have every reason in the world to be optimistic. We are an incredible nation, an incredible province. I'm born and raised here, and you can't take the Alberta out of me. We have so many amazing natural resources. We have incredible human talent here. And I just have all the hope in the world that we can continue on the path that we once were of being a strong and prosperous nation that has significant influence in the world and is respected in the world and acts as a model in the world. But, and this goes back to the economic recovery, Catherine, is that it has to be done strategically. This can't be piecemeal, a bit here, a bit there. Things like the WE contract, where a $900 million contract is just, awarded out of nowhere. It has to be strategic. And I mentioned, what I would do if I was the Prime Minister in terms of that industry evaluation. It has to be done consciously. So that's similar to strategically, sort of keeping in mind the bigger picture and what else the world is going through. And I could get into China and Hong Kong and Belarus, but we don't have time. And then practically, right? Because like so many plans, you can have a perfect plan, but when you go to implement it, you really see what something is like. And I mentioned to you before the taping that for me, for example, it was going to Ottawa, like it was a real education coming out of my house after, 2.5 months to take that flight to Ottawa at the beginning of June. I think the Uber driver thought I was crazy because I was there in my mask, sort of peeking out at the world. Like the Deerfoot looked like a whole different place. It was crazy. But to go through that of wearing your mask all the time and getting your temperature check and just the necessity to mitigate risk in our lives now. So we have to be practical when we are going forward. But as I said, I have all the hope in the world based upon where I grew up, and that is Calgary. That is Calgary Midnapore, and it is just it is a series of generations of industrious, resilient, intelligent people. And I know this will carry on, and I'm so excited about that. But as I said in my recommendations, people have to recognize the consequences of their actions, and that includes voting as well. But Catherine, we have so much to be excited about in the future as we come out of this. It has been challenging, but I really think it will lead to possibilities and connections and outcomes that we could have never imagined or foreseen, like this pandemic.
So true. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for your service to our community and to our country. It's a true sacrifice, as I said in my introduction, and I'm very grateful to you and your family.
Thank you so much again, Catherine, for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Well, everybody, that was Stephanie Kusie, an amazing leader in our great country. I am delighted that she was able to join us today, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you on the next Cats Track. Have a great day.